The Miami Dolphins just dropped a nuclear bomb on Cleveland's front office that could destroy Shedur Sanders' career before it even starts. While Andrew Berry was reviewing game film last Tuesday morning, his phone exploded with the kind of call that makes general managers question everything they thought they knew about the NFL. Miami wasn't calling to chat about weather patterns. They wanted Shedur Sanders, and they wanted him now. Not in 2 years when his rookie contract expires. Not when Cleveland finally figures out their quarterback situation. Right now, while the kid's value is at its peak, and before Kevin Stefanski's stubbornness destroys another promising career. The proposal Miami floated wasn't just aggressive, it was surgical. 2 first-round picks, a proven starter, and enough cap relief to rebuild Cleveland's defense. Most franchises would need a board meeting and 3 weeks of deliberation before even considering such an offer. Berry had Miami on hold for exactly 90 seconds before his hands started shaking. But what Andrew Berry discovered next would make this look like child's play, because this wasn't Miami's first call about Shedur Sanders. Sources inside the Browns organization confirmed that at least 4 teams have made inquiries about the young quarterback since training camp ended. Atlanta, New England, Minnesota, even Kansas City made discreet contact about Sanders' availability, despite already having Patrick Mahomes locked up long-term. When NFL executives start circling a rookie quarterback like sharks detecting blood in the water, it sends a very specific message to the player's current team. Either you're sitting on a generational talent, or you're about to become the franchise that let one slip through your fingers. Cleveland fans already know which category their team usually falls into. The irony burns like acid rain on a fresh wound. For the first time in decades, Cleveland drafted a quarterback with legitimate star potential. Sanders entered the NFL with arm strength that makes veteran scouts reach for their calculators, and pocket presence that takes most quarterbacks 5 years to develop. College tape shows a player who could step into most NFL systems and produce immediately. Instead, he's collecting dust on Cleveland's bench, while Kevin Stefanski treats him like he's radioactive waste that might contaminate the locker room if handled incorrectly. Meanwhile, Stefanski's beloved system continues producing the same mediocre results that have defined Cleveland football for the better part of 2 decades. The offensive coordinator masquerading as a head coach has become so attached to his schemes that he'd rather lose games with familiar players than win with unfamiliar talent. Unless the leak wasn't a leak at all. Multiple sources suggest that information about Miami's trade offer didn't accidentally find its way to reporters. Someone inside Cleveland's organization wanted this story public, and the timing feels deliberately calculated to apply maximum pressure on Stefanski's decision-making process. If Berry orchestrated the leak, it represents a desperate general manager's attempt to force his head coach's hand through public opinion. If Stefanski was behind it, he's trying to demonstrate that other teams value Sanders more than his own coaching staff does, potentially setting up the trade as inevitable rather than optional. Either way, the leak transformed a private negotiation into a very public referendum on Shedur Sanders' future in Cleveland. The fan reaction has been swift and brutal. Social media platforms overflow with photoshopped images of Sanders wearing Miami teal, accompanied by captions that range from heartbroken to furious. Season ticket holders are demanding answers from a front office that seems incapable of providing them. Brown supporters have endured enough quarterback catastrophes to recognize the warning signs when they appear. They've watched promising careers destroyed by coaching incompetence, front office dysfunction, and organizational arrogance that prioritizes systems over talent. This time feels different, because the player they're about to lose actually has the tools to succeed elsewhere. That wasn't the real bombshell, because while Berry was fielding trade calls and managing media fallout, league sources revealed that Sanders himself has grown increasingly frustrated with his role in Cleveland's offense. The young quarterback hasn't requested a trade publicly, but people close to the situation describe a player who questions whether his development is being maximized under current circumstances. Professional athletes rarely voice dissatisfaction during their rookie seasons, especially not high draft picks who understand that public criticism can damage their reputation and future earning potential. When a rookie quarterback starts expressing doubts about his situation, it usually means the problems run deeper than what outside observers can see. Sanders recognizes his own talent level. He watches game film and sees opportunities that Stefanski's offense never creates. He studies other rookie quarterbacks around the league and notices the differences in how they're being developed and utilized. Young players aren't stupid. They can identify when their potential is being wasted. The coaching staff continues insisting that Sanders needs more time to learn the system. But players in the locker room quietly question whether the system is worth learning in the first place. Veterans have watched talented quarterbacks cycle through Cleveland for years, each one diminished by the same fundamental problems that plague the organization's approach to offensive football. If Sanders requests a trade, Barry's leverage in negotiations disappears completely. NFL teams know when a player wants out, and they adjust their offers accordingly. Miami's generous proposal could quickly become a discount package if Sanders forces Cleveland's hand through public demands or agent maneuvering. One name changes everything: Kyle Shanahan. The San Francisco head coach has maintained a relationship with Sanders dating back to college recruiting visits and pre-draft evaluations. League insiders suggest that Shanahan views Sanders as the ideal quarterback for his offensive system, and San Francisco has quietly explored potential trade scenarios that would bring the young player to the West Coast. Unlike Miami's aggressive approach, San Francisco operates with surgical precision in the trade market. They've built a reputation for identifying undervalued talent and maximizing player potential through innovative scheme design and development programs that produce consistent results. If Shanahan enters the Sanders sweepstakes, it changes the entire dynamic of potential negotiations. Miami offers immediate opportunity and financial compensation. San Francisco provides long-term development and championship-level coaching. Both options represent significant upgrades over Cleveland's current situation. Barry finds himself managing a situation where his franchise quarterback is being courted by organizations that actually know how to develop elite talent. Every day that passes without resolution increases the likelihood that Sanders will eventually force his way out of Cleveland. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone imagined. Sources connected to multiple NFL front offices suggest that Sanders' agent has been working behind the scenes to gauge interest from specific teams since early in the season, rather than waiting for Cleveland to make developmental decisions. The representation is being proactive about identifying optimal landing spots for their clients' long-term success. This type of maneuvering typically happens during contract negotiations or after several seasons of established performance. When rookie quarterback agents start shopping their clients before the first season ends, it indicates serious concerns about the current organization's ability to maximize the player's potential. Agent involvement adds another layer of complexity to Barry's decision-making process. Even if Cleveland refuses all trade offers and commits to Sanders' development, they'll need to convince his representation that staying represents the best career move. Professional agents evaluate situations based on long-term earning potential and championship opportunities, not organizational loyalty or draft investment. If Sanders' camp concludes that Cleveland lacks the infrastructure to support his development, they'll continue pushing for a trade, regardless of what the front office prefers. Player empowerment in today's NFL means that unhappy stars rarely remain with teams that don't meet their professional expectations. The Browns organization thought they were managing internal quarterback development. Instead, they're dealing with a league-wide recruitment process for one of the NFL's most promising young talents. Because what Miami offered wasn't just a trade proposal, it was a declaration of war. And Barry had 48 hours to decide if he was willing to burn everything down to save one player. The ultimatum arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered through official channels with the kind of professional courtesy that barely conceals underlying aggression. Miami's final offer included provisions that would expire at midnight on Saturday, creating artificial pressure designed to force Cleveland's hand before they could fully evaluate alternatives. General managers hate ultimatums, especially ones that arrive with media attention already swirling around the player in question. Barry recognized the tactic immediately. Miami was using public pressure and artificial deadlines to extract maximum value from a franchise that couldn't afford to let Sanders' situation deteriorate further. The Dolphins had done their homework. They understood Cleveland's organizational dynamics, Stefanski's reluctance to play Sanders, and the mounting fan pressure that threatens to consume the entire coaching staff if the quarterback situation remains unresolved. Miami knew exactly which buttons to push to create maximum leverage in trade negotiations. Accepting the offer would mean admitting that Cleveland couldn't develop their own draft pick. Rejecting it would mean betting everything on Stefanski's ability to eventually utilize Sanders effectively. Neither option offered guarantees, but one carried significantly more long-term risk than the other. Berry spent 47 hours evaluating the most consequential decision of his professional career. Every conversation with scouts, coaches, and front office personnel reinforced the same basic conclusion. Sanders possessed elite talent that Cleveland wasn't maximizing under current circumstances. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that rejecting Miami's offer wouldn't solve Cleveland's fundamental issues with quarterback development. Even if Sanders remained on the roster, he'd still be playing for a coaching staff that viewed him as a backup rather than a franchise cornerstone. Keeping him would satisfy fans temporarily while potentially damaging his long-term development and career trajectory. Professional sports executives face these impossible decisions regularly, choosing between short-term organizational stability and long-term player development. Berry understood that his choice would define not only Sanders' career, but also his own reputation as a talent evaluator and team builder. The clock was ticking on something far worse than a missed trade opportunity. It was ticking on the destruction of a relationship between a promising quarterback and the organization that drafted him, unless someone was playing both sides. League sources revealed that Stefanski had been in direct communication with Sanders' agent throughout the trade speculation period. Rather than discussing development plans or increased playing time, the conversations focused on managing expectations and maintaining professional relationships regardless of the quarterback's ultimate destination. These discussions suggested that Stefanski had already concluded that Sanders would eventually be traded, and he was positioning himself to avoid blame for the outcome. By maintaining cordial relationships with the player's representation, the head coach could claim that personality conflicts or coaching disagreements weren't factors in trade negotiations. The political maneuvering extended beyond simple damage control. Stefanski needed to protect his reputation with future quarterback prospects and their agents. If word spread throughout the league that Cleveland's head coach didn't support his own draft picks, it would complicate future recruitment and development efforts. Berry discovered these conversations through sources within the agent community, rather than direct disclosure from his coaching staff. The breakdown in communication between general manager and head coach represented a fundamental crack in Cleveland's organizational structure that extended far beyond quarterback decisions. When front office and coaching staff operate with different agendas regarding the same player, it creates an environment where optimal decisions become impossible. Sanders wasn't just caught between competing organizations. He was trapped within a dysfunctional power structure that couldn't align on basic developmental priorities. What happened next shocked even the insiders. Sanders requested a private meeting with Berry on Friday afternoon, exactly 18 hours before Miami's trade deadline expired. The conversation lasted 43 minutes and covered topics ranging from personal development goals to championship aspirations that seemed impossible to achieve in Cleveland's current environment. The young quarterback didn't demand a trade, but he asked direct questions about the organization's commitment to his success and timeline for meaningful playing time. Sanders wanted to understand whether Cleveland viewed him as a franchise cornerstone or a valuable trade asset that could be monetized when market conditions were favorable. Berry provided honest answers about organizational challenges and coaching staff dynamics that had limited Sanders' opportunities during his rookie season. The general manager acknowledged that ideal development situations don't always align with draft investment or fan expectations, especially when coaching philosophies conflict with player skill sets. Sanders appreciated the honesty, but made it clear that his primary concern was maximizing his potential during the limited window that defines NFL careers. If staying in Cleveland offered the best path toward that goal, he'd commit completely to the process. If not, he'd prefer an organization that actually wanted to build around his talents. The conversation ended without definitive resolution, but Berry understood the underlying message. Sanders wasn't threatening to create problems if he remained in Cleveland, but he also wasn't guaranteeing long-term satisfaction with a situation that might waste crucial developmental years. One decision would destroy everything. Berry spent Friday night weighing options that all carried significant risks and uncertain rewards. Accepting Miami's trade offer would provide immediate value, but might cost Cleveland their best quarterback prospect in decades. Rejecting it would maintain roster control while potentially alienating a player whose agent was already exploring alternative destinations. The decision ultimately came down to organizational philosophy and risk tolerance. Did Cleveland believe they could eventually maximize Sanders' potential despite current coaching limitations? Were they willing to bet their franchise's future on Stefanski's ability to adapt his system to accommodate elite quarterback talent? League executives who faced similar decisions offered conflicting advice based on their own experiences with player development and coaching staff management. Some argued that talented players eventually find ways to succeed regardless of initial circumstances. Others insisted that early career development determines long-term trajectory in ways that can't be corrected later. Berry's choice would establish precedent for how Cleveland handled future conflicts between coaching preferences and player potential. It would also send a message to other young talents about the organization's willingness to prioritize individual development over systemic comfort. The general manager understood that no decision would satisfy everyone involved. Sanders might succeed or struggle regardless of his destination. Stefanski might eventually embrace or continue resisting quarterback talent that didn't fit his preferred mold. Miami might maximize Sanders' potential or mismanage it just as badly as Cleveland. The truth they buried was even darker. Internal reports revealed that Stefanski had privately lobbied for trading Sanders since early October, arguing that the quarterback's skill set didn't match Cleveland's offensive identity and long-term strategic vision. The head coach believed that building around Sanders would require systematic changes that could destabilize other aspects of the team's performance. These recommendations directly contradicted public statements about Sanders' development timeline and role within the organization. While Stefanski publicly supported patience and gradual integration, he privately advocated for maximizing trade value before other teams recognized the same scheme fit concerns that troubled his evaluation. The contradiction exposed a fundamental dishonesty in how Cleveland communicated about their quarterback situation to fans, media, and presumably Sanders himself. If the head coach never intended to build around Sanders' talents, then his rookie season was essentially an elaborate showcase designed to maintain trade value while avoiding public criticism. Berry had been operating under the assumption that Stefanski needed more time to integrate Sanders into existing offensive concepts. Learning that his head coach viewed the quarterback as expendable rather than developmental changed the entire context of trade negotiations and organizational planning. The general manager faced a choice between supporting a head coach who had apparently deceived him about quarterback evaluation, or backing a player whose agent was already exploring alternative destinations. Neither option offered clear advantages, but one represented a betrayal of the trust that should exist between front office and coaching staff. Cleveland's dysfunction had reached levels that made organizational recovery seem impossible regardless of personnel decisions. Saturday arrived with resolution deadlines looming and relationships fractured beyond simple repair. Berry's choice would determine Sanders' immediate future while establishing precedent for how Cleveland balanced coaching preferences against player potential in future decisions. The phone call to Miami lasted 7 minutes. Berry's decision shocked league executives who had predicted different outcomes based on organizational behavior patterns and financial considerations that typically guide trade negotiations. Cleveland rejected Miami's offer, but the rejection came with conditions that surprised everyone involved, including Sanders and his representation. Berry demanded immediate changes to Sanders' role within the offensive system and guaranteed playing time that would allow proper evaluation of his development progress. Stefanski agreed to the modifications, understanding that his job security now depended on successfully integrating a quarterback he had privately wanted to trade. The head coach's public support for Sanders would be tested through actual opportunity, rather than media statements designed to manage expectations. Sanders committed to Cleveland for the remainder of his rookie contract, while maintaining the right to reevaluate his situation, based on organizational changes and development opportunities. His agent would monitor progress closely and maintain communication with other teams interested in future availability. The compromise satisfied no one completely, but provided framework for moving forward without destroying relationships or wasting elite talent through organizational dysfunction. Cleveland kept their quarterback while acknowledging systemic problems that required immediate attention. Miami's interest didn't disappear with rejection. Other teams continued monitoring Sanders' situation, waiting for opportunities that might emerge if Cleveland's developmental promises failed to materialize. The quarterback's future remained uncertain despite resolution of immediate trade speculation. Barry's gamble was that forcing Stefanski to actually utilize Sanders would either prove the quarterback's elite potential or reveal developmental limitations that justified different personnel decisions. Either outcome would provide clarity that had been missing throughout the rookie season's confusion and conflicting evaluations. The NFL's most dysfunctional franchise had chosen to fix itself rather than trade away another promising player. Whether that choice would lead to championship contention or continued mediocrity remained to be seen. But for the first time in decades, Cleveland was betting on talent over comfort. Sanders' story continues unfolding with higher stakes and greater scrutiny than any rookie quarterback should have to manage. His success or failure will determine careers, define legacies, and potentially reshape how NFL organizations balance coaching preferences against player development in future personnel decisions. The pressure is immense. The potential is limitless. The outcome will determine whether Cleveland finally learned from decades of quarterback mismanagement, or whether they're destined to repeat the same mistakes that have defined their franchise's tragic history. Subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking chapter in this unfolding disaster that could either save Cleveland football or destroy it completely.